Coming straight from my hometown in Queens, New York City, we're here at the Queens Library Langston Hughes Community and Cultural Center, where for 36 years, my guest served as an executive director, transforming this library into a renowned institution of African American studies and cultural enrichment. Even after retirement, he remains deeply engaged in academia, serving as a professor at both York College and Queens College. Alongside his literary contributions and military service, his dedication to historic preservation and community engagement highlights his lasting impact on the cultural landscape of Queens and beyond. Please join me in welcoming to Unbanned Coolies, Professor Andrew Jackson.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for this opportunity.
Before we start with my questions, I want to mention Professor Jackson served in the United States Air Force from 1964 to 1968, achieving the rank of Staff Sergeant and earning a Bronze Star for his service with the 4th Air Commando Squadron in Vietnam. Our country owes its freedom to you and your fellow service members, so thank you for your service, Professor Jackson.
Thank you.
Were there any childhood books, authors, or heroes that inspired or influenced your passion for libraries and community engagement?
When I think of books that I was excited about reading as a child, being the children of teachers, and my mother was a teacher, and she always encouraged us to read. She enrolled us in the Book of the Month Club at that time, and we had to read on a regular basis. My favorite books were the books by Alexander Dumas, The Three Musketeers, Man in the Iron Mask, and The Count of Monte Cristo. And of course, I would segue from reading the books to actually looking at the movies over and over again in the swashbuckler days of the Three Musketeers in France, etc. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I learned that Alexander Dumas was actually a black man of Haitian descent. And that excited me even more because I never knew, and nobody ever told me that he was black, but I loved his writings. In terms of community engagement, that didn't come from exterior heroes, that came from my heroes in my family, both my mother and my father. My father was a statistician with the Corps of Engineers during the tail end of World War II when my family migrated to New York City from Mississippi. And he was always taller than tall to me. I always wanted to be like my father. When he retired, he started volunteering through our church with the Head Start program. He was an exceptional mathematician, so he did the budgets. And when the director retired, he actually took over as director of the Head Start program. So that was part of my heroism came from my dad. It didn't, later on, of course, it was Jackie Robinson and other sports figures and movie stars, but my dad was always my first hero and anybody I looked up to. Even during the days when I was an adult, when coming home from Vietnam and going through the trauma of trying to reacclimate to civilian life, my dad was the one I could always sit down and talk to, and he always had a calm demeanor about him. So my father was my hero, and got me involved in community activities as a young person. Growing up in the church, growing up in the community was always about activism because it was during that civil rights, black power period that was part of my generation of growing up, and activism was part of everybody's life during that time.
Can you share some insights into your journey as an executive director of the Langston Hughes Community Library and Cultural Center, particularly regarding how you've promoted diversity and inclusivity within its collections, programs, and services?
Well, being a library, one of the things that I learned at an early age from before I even received my graduate degree and went to school to learn about library science was working with librarians here because I was not a librarian, I was not a manager. I was a manager. I'd been worked in the city of New York in human resources and was majoring in business administration through Baruch College, through the University of New York. So I was studying the library as another form of management. And the staff here actually taught me and grounded me in understanding the purpose of libraries, the mission of libraries, and how important libraries were. The fundamental premise was providing access of information for everybody, not just some people, but everybody. And this was important because Langston Hughes was a unique federal project under the Queens Public Library as the Black Heritage Library for the Borough of Queens, with the collection that served the entire borough and not just the local community of Corona to Elmhurst. But the community was changing on a regular basis, which had changed from growing up in this neighborhood as well. It changed from an Eastern European community to an African American community. More people coming in from the Caribbean, people even coming from Africa, the South, migrating from the South to New York like my family did. But then there were other elements in the community that were changing as the library grew as well. More Spanish-speaking people during the 70s and 80s, and particularly during the 1980s. So the thing was, the library had to have two focuses. One was, of course, providing that information, book collections and programs on the Black experience that were not in any of the other libraries in Queens. That was our main focus, and that was why we were created. Secondly, because the library was managed, conceived of and managed by the residents of the community under the auspices of Queens Library, there was a great community focus on the library. Staffing came from the community. The books and programs were all about the Black experience. But there was always a carved out in every collection is the general collection that has the general material all people need specifically by students. The dictionaries, the anthologies, the biographies, material that everybody needs in the library, the ready reference material. So we had to concentrate on keeping that collection intact because everybody would come in and use that collection, whereas everybody might not at that time. This is going back into the early 1980s. Everybody might not have used the Black Heritage Collection, but they definitely would have used the general collection. Secondly, we had a homework program. And the homework program had children from all over the area. So you had to have material that would help them with their schoolwork as well. So the library had two different focuses. But as the community changed and as I started learning more about Black Studies by taking Black Studies courses as part of my undergraduate program, you also realize that the Black experience was not just in Africa or here in America, but it was in the Caribbean with the influence of French and Spanish, British in Central South America with the same, and again with Portuguese, Spanish, French, Dutch, and in the United States with the other colonized countries that colonized the United States. So there was always this influx of Black studies and Black culture, but it was connected to all the other cultures that were part of the Black experience. So as we looked at the collection, we wanted to make sure that the collections and the programs and services reflected the totality of the Black experience and not just civil rights, human rights, and the Civil War, slavery, etc. And that was how the library was developing and how the collections were growing. Even the programs that we developed, we had panel discussions discussing all these different things with focuses and viewpoints from different cultures as well, because they were part of that experience in America. So Langston Hughes has always been about focusing on the Black experience, but for us, the Black experience was as expansive as world history was, and more expansive than what we learned about American history when we were going through the public school system. So the collections and programs and services were designed to educate, enlighten, and even expose people to what Black history was, Black culture was, but the connectedness to all the other cultures that are part of the Black experience in our eyes.
What inspired you to pursue a career in library management, and how have your personal values influenced your efforts to ensure that the library's offerings reflect the diverse backgrounds and experiences of the community it serves?
That's probably one of the more difficult questions to answer because I didn't start out to pursue a career in library management. I started out coming out of the Air Force in 1968. With the challenge of going to college. I was not a good student in high school. I didn't have inspiration from counselors and teachers that encouraged me to go to college. They told me I was not a good prospect for college, that I was not college material. But going through the military taught me to challenge things that I couldn't do or I had difficulty doing, and the discipline that I probably lacked in high school and in my early years, I came out with a level of discipline that made a difference as well. So when I came out of the Air Force and decided I definitely want to go to college and I want to prove all those teachers and counselors wrong by getting a college degree, I decided to major in management, in business management, because no matter what the business, no matter what field, management was part of that field, and I could use that skill anywhere that I worked. And that's really how I got into management and started studying management and business, and worked with the City of New York in human resources for 8 years. Went out to California, worked with Chevrolet in auto sales and customer service. Then when I came home, looking for work, the opportunity opened up for me to apply for the position at Langston Hughes as the assistant supervisor because of my activism in the community, my familiarity with CUNY East Elmhurst growing up here, but also because of the background that I had in business and management that they thought would enhance the services and the capability of what Langston Hughes Library was providing. So that was really how I got involved with management. In terms of the library's offerings and reflecting diverse backgrounds, we wanted to make sure that the library was an attraction to people that did not use libraries. We saw that we needed to concentrate not just on the people who came to the library, but people who would come to the library because of the Black Heritage Collection and their exposing them to the community at large, to books and programs and services about the Black experience that weren't available. But we also wanted to look at the diversity of material. So it wasn't just books. It was books, it was film, it was programs, it was concerts, and we decided the arts had another role at the library that was not necessarily typical during that particular period. Libraries, for the most part, in the early 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, was successful based on circulation. The more circulation, higher circulation, book circulation you had, the better the library was funded, etc. Langston Hughes was looking at it differently. We looked at our responsibility in a community of people from the Black experience that never used libraries or never were allowed to use libraries. My mother was a college degree teacher in Mississippi. But it was illegal for her to use the public library. And many of my parents' colleagues and generation, libraries was not part of their lexicon. It wasn't part of their region because they weren't allowed to use libraries, or there were no libraries there, or they were so segregated that the library didn't serve the needs of people of color in those areas. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for exposure to libraries, the mission of libraries and how libraries would enhance the lives of everybody, and especially for the children growing up in the community. So part of our concept was to attract non-readers and non-library users and transpose them from non-users to readers and non-library users to library users on a regular basis. And by that, we felt the arts played a new role in attracting people to the library. So when you walked into the library, as you see today, there are pictures everywhere that reflect the Black experience. Story times, we had books with the covers faced out so that people would see faces of Black people on the covers of books. And then people who wrote books that were Black, like Langston Hughes and Paul Laurence Dunbar, Frederick Douglass, and all the others. People were not aware of a lot of that material. The idea was to expose them to this new concept of librarianship that was through the eyes of African American people, and we call that Black librarianship. So the ability to take the works of a Langston Hughes, the books, the short stories, the children's books, the young adult books, the plays, the plethora of work that Langston Hughes wrote, it was exposing a whole family to books about the Black experience at different age levels. And we wanted everybody to have something on their shelf that could say, this is from the Black experience. And that would also translate to some of the same experiences other cultures had coming from different parts of the Caribbean, Central South America, even the African continent. You could see those same stories played out in different cultures as well. And by looking at it that way, and also having been exposed to what customer service was about working at the dealership, you always want to make sure that that customer experience was enhanced through the way customers were served, not just by coming to the library and receiving the book that they wanted or receiving the information that they wanted, but how well they were treated at the library. And we also concentrated on that. Interacting with the customer, the personal experience with the customer may be more valuable than actually whether they came to the library and walked out with the book that they wanted or the item that they came there for. How well were they served? How well do you understand your customers? How well do you understand your community? The outreach into the community to attract those non-library users and non-readers. And it means that we were also looking at the concept of serving the underserved, those whose services were not being provided but the library, we needed to consider that, but even more so the unserved, those people who never use libraries, those non-readers and non-library users. How do you bring them into the library? So the more things that we created, the homework program, the cultural arts program, information referral services were ways to bring people into the library and make the library a focal hub of the community, so when people wanted to know information, the library would be the place that they would come to.
How do you envision the role of libraries evolving in the digital age? And what strategies do you think are essential for libraries and to remain relevant and accessible to diverse communities?
I think the libraries, I'll give you an example. Queens Library, back in the late 90s, I don't think it was even into the 21st century, but late 90s, looked at the idea of communities. Now, Langston Hughes started out Langston Hughes Community Library and Culture Center. It was always about serving the needs of the Queens community, but also Corona East Elmhurst. So the focus was always on community. The Queens Library saw this as a reason to alter the focus of all of the libraries in Queens, and now all of the libraries are called community libraries because each library focuses on the culture of their individual communities. So you can go to different parts of Queens and find collections that reflect the cultures of that community, programs and services that reflect the culture of that community, staffing that hopefully that reflects the culture of that community as well. So the idea of making your library a community library is something that you have to work at and work toward, and not just put a name on the library. The services that are provided throughout Queens, you can travel all over Queens County and go through all of the different cultures in Queens and see the world represented in libraries in Queens. And libraries are one of those essential services that every community has, and if it's done right, it'll enhance the development and the progress of that particular community. So I think that's what Queens Library has done. Langston Hughes continues to do that as well. With art exhibits, with film festivals, with book author talks and book talks, concerts, film festivals, all types of programs, we offer programs and services that represent different cultures and not just the African American culture or the Black culture. And with that, you're representing the community. So people will come to Langston Hughes Library, to our gallery, and see artwork from people from other cultures, but they will be experiencing it in an environment that represents the African American experience as well. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is what you see with the equipment that's behind me, is to take the collections that we have, book collections, audio-visual collections, and transpose those and digitize that material so that it's available to future generations, and it's exposing them to material and history and culture and library-related sources that are online and not just in a book format or electronic format. And I think that's one of the main things that many libraries are doing now, is going to a digitizing things so that somebody doesn't have to come to the library. They can access the library online. They can find access material in the library and collections on the library through digitized formats. And even memory projects, like Queens has a memory project where they interview people from all forms of life, from all experiences that reflect Queens. I like one of the ideas that they're doing now, program in progress, is to identify and provide some background information on all of the people who have streets named after them in our borough, We drive all over the borough and you look up and you'll see a sign with somebody's name on it. You have no idea who that person is. Why was the street named after that person? Having a project for the future generations that identify who the person was, what that street was, and why the street was named after that person provides a whole different image of what Queens County is and the multiculturalism that becomes part of the generation of Queens, the history of Queens. And I think that's important. So there are a lot of different projects, as creative as you can be, as innovative as you can be, using all the new technology with a phone that takes excellent pictures as a 35mm camera. You've got equipment in your hand that you can use to document and do research and reach out into the world of librarianship, and it enhances what we do for the future. It enhances how we provide information to the community. Remembering the mission of the library is to provide access to information. So every form of digitalization or cameras or computers, anything you can use to enhance that ability to serve the mission of providing access to information, that would be the future of what we do in libraries. And how will we do it? Somebody will come up with an idea. We'll enhance that idea. We'll magnify that idea. And then it'll expand and it'll spread and become a norm within the way of serving the community. So everything we do is about enhancing services, reaching out to the community, bringing people to the library, whether it's through their homes or whether they come into the facility of a library. That's what we were about for the 21st century and even leading into the 22nd.
You bring your wealth of experience to the Queens Library Board of Trustees, where you champion transparent governance and continued access to quality educational and community programs. What initiatives or partnerships has the library employed to reflect the diverse backgrounds and experiences of the community it serves?
Boards of trustees vary depending on the libraries. The 3 municipal libraries in New York City, all of the boards of trustees are appointed by the mayor's office or the borough president of that borough. So I'm a borough president appointment, that there are people on the board who are appointed through the mayor's office. But there are 19 members on our board of trustees, and each of these board of trustees represent a region in Queens, so that Queens County is represented on the board of trustees based on the appointments by the different boards through the community planning boards. For example, my appointment represents Community Planning Board 3, Corona East Elmhurst. Others will represent the community plannings in that area. So by doing that, we have a very diverse board of trustee members. That will vary if you go out to Long Island, if you go upstate in Westchester County. There are many libraries that only have 5 members on a board of trustees, and many of those board members are not appointed, but they're elected. So it's about how the election process is conducted. Within New York City, all of our libraries and all of our communities are represented on the boards of trustees because they're of the appointment process, and that it reflects the cultures of the communities as well. So that diversity of New York City is seen on the boards of trustees of libraries within the New York Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, and Queens Public Library.
As someone who has devoted his life to the promotion of literacy, learning, and to the betterment of the community, how do you believe libraries can continue to serve as a vital resource for education and community enrichment?
I believe society benefits greatly from the role and the mission of libraries, but also the role and mission and the purpose of librarians in schools and communities, on college campuses and school settings. Special libraries. The librarian is a representative of the profession, but also all of the experiences that we bring as individuals and citizens. And coming from different cultures, we bring those experiences to the library. And all of those skills and talents are useful in our role as librarians working with the public. When I talk to my graduate students, I remind them that if they're artists, if they're musicians, if they're poets, if they're writers, all of those skills can be used and represented in how they conduct their lives and their roles as librarians in the library community. We are about providing that service to the community, and I believe that the role of the library cannot be taken away from a community. I think that's every library that has communities needs communities, and that librarians and libraries need the community to serve, and that is what that back and forth information is about. Especially in a time where you can go online and access any kind of information you want. So part of the role of the library is clarifying how accurate that information is and how to make a decision in separating what you find as information online to make sure you have what is accurate information and the best information for research, for writing, for publishing, for school projects. The library helps to provide that clarification for students on a regular basis and adults as well. And I think the other part of it is adults being able to come to the library because the change that's taking place with how you apply for jobs, how you apply for services, for healthcare and other things, everything is now online, so that the library also has to have that material and that technology to be able to benefit the communities that it serves, but the people it serves, in making it accessible and readily available for them to come to the library and use that information to apply for the jobs, to apply online, but also staffing that can teach them how to use this research, how to provide this information, and how to use this technology for the betterment of citizens in the community.
As a professor, how do you integrate your academic expertise into your advocacy for libraries and community engagement?
I am a librarian. I became an educator. In all my experiences as a librarian, all of the ideas and possibilities that I created through the library, I bring to the classroom with my students, because I see my role as an educator in twofold. One is to teach Black studies at the undergraduate level, and second, library science at the graduate level. But the other part of my responsibility is to do everything I can to make my students better students at the end of the semester than they were when they first started. So hints on how to write better and write well, how to do research, how to access information, particularly students who did not get a good grounding in writing and research in high school. How to express themselves, how to speak, do public speaking. It's something, these are all acquired traits and not something that you're born with. So the idea is to also work with students to develop their schools. Being on time for classes is just as important as being on time for work. Turning in your projects on time is just as important for a grade as it is in the workplace. So the skill development is part of our responsibility as educators. And again, my role is to help make them a better student at the end of the semester than they were when they began the semester with me. So all of those skills that I have, all those skills that I've developed, all the mentoring that I've had over my lifetime, and I still have mentors now, and I'm a retired librarian, author, and academic, but I still have mentors that I go to when I have questions or I have directions that I need some clarification on. All of those skills that we need as adults, we pass on to our students to make them better students and better prepared for the workplace when they graduate with an undergrad or they graduate with their library science degree, to make them better librarians in the workplace.
Drawing upon my interview with Shannon Bland at Black Librarians, she highlighted the scarcity of Black male librarians and emphasized the importance of increasing representation in the field. How do you plan to leverage your extensive experience and accomplishments to inspire more young Black men to pursue a career in librarianship?
Okay, that's a good question. I have been involved in outreach for most of my library career, and gained a heavy reputation doing extensive outreach to the community. And I think that the answer to that starts with that premise that I've been an activist librarian in line with those who have mentored me and have been role models in the profession, that they have never been probably more than 7% of the total population of librarians in the country. Probably less than 10% are black male librarians. So when I go into a school, and I've gone into schools from elementary, middle, high school, college campuses, community meetings, outreach to encourage people to consider the field of librarianship as a viable, rewarding career. I didn't grow up thinking about being a librarian. I was fortunate enough that the opportunity for this position at Langston Hughes came along, and I saw within 2 or 3 years, while I was still working on my undergrad and graduate degrees, that this profession had something about it that grabbed me and made me want to stay in it for more than 36 years, and even after retirement, still being on the board of trustees. So we are part of a continuum, that there have been people, black men in the profession going back into the 17 and 1800s that were role models for those of us who are in the profession now in the 21st century. And that when we go out to the schools, when we go into the community and we are black men, librarian is a very minor career for those who had never thought about being librarians. But when they see black male librarians and some of the things that we are doing as heads of public libraries, managers of branch libraries, specialists in certain fields on college campuses, in special collections and different environments, that things that we are doing in this profession and things that I'm doing. Right now I'm waiting for the release of my latest book, The Handbook of Black Librarianship, 3rd edition. That is a role model for people who are in the profession as well, and creating a resource for the future on what black librarianship is about, how it has changed, some of the issues we've dealt with in libraries as black librarians, being part of being accepted into profession, have opening doors in the profession, even sometimes knocking down doors so that we would have opportunities that wouldn't be denied just because of our skin color or because of our culture. And I think black librarians in whole have created a black caucus of the American Library Association, and out of that have come other cultural ethnic caucuses, the Asian Pacific, American Indian, Chinese American, Spanish speaking, and the Black Caucus. All of those black caucuses, all of those ethnic caucuses deal with librarianship from their perspectives, and they challenge the profession and the American Library Association to be better and represent all of us, and everybody should have the same opportunities of equality and justice within our profession as we do in society. So I think that being a black librarian and a black male librarian is still a minority, but the role of this and the things that we're doing in this profession help us stand out and serve as role models for other young people to consider being librarians when they grow up.
Considering the recent wave of banned books in various communities, how do you perceive the role of libraries and librarians in safeguarding intellectual freedom and promoting access to diverse perspectives, especially in the context of your experience advocating for literacy and community engagement?
Tracy D. Hall was the most recent African American executive director of the American Library Association. She gave an acceptance speech fairly recently for being named one of the Time 100 most influential black people. And when I looked at that exposure to librarianship and librarians by Ms. Hall, and the presentation that she gave and how we make such a difference as librarians in the world, and to our communities and to our families and into the role of the community, she made a statement that free people read freely. And she talked about that in context of having access to books, and that everybody should have access to books because free people read freely. And that this whole challenge of banned books and censorship is something that is not new. It's been going on for decades, but it's still something we challenge because the role of the library is to provide that access to information. And all points of view, all perspectives are found in the library. If you're going to do research, you have to find research on all different aspects of the topic you're doing research on. You can't do that if you start banning books and taking books out of a collection because somebody finds that it doesn't belong there. All those books belong in the library. And the background for that challenge and successful challenge against banned books and censorship has always been the dedicated creation of collection development policies in our libraries. How do we make selections on books? Where do those books belong? What is the lifespan of a book? And how do you challenge, if a book is challenged, what is the justification for that book in our collection? So they're always going to, especially these days with all the things that are going on with politics and government, there's always going to be these challenges. But the library is solidly founded on rules, guidelines, and development of what library collections and programs and the library itself is for, about, and with. And the library will always continue to stand up against banned books, challenge anything that is about censorship so that people can have access to information because free people read freely.
In closing, our conversation with Professor Jackson has shed light on his remarkable dedication to library management, community enrichment, and the promotion of diversity and inclusivity. From his transformative leadership at the Langston Hughes Community Library to his role as a professor and tireless advocate for literacy and learning, Professor Jackson's lifelong commitment to fostering cultural understanding and education is truly inspiring. As he continues to champion the vital role of libraries in our digital age, it is evident that his passion and vision will leave a lasting impact on the communities he serves and the future of library services.
Thank you, Krista, for this conversation and for this opportunity. I have enjoyed my 36 plus years as a librarian, and I definitely recommend it as a viable, rewarding profession for anybody who considers what they would like to do with the rest of their life that will have a positive outcome. I also want to make sure that it's also included in this interview that I am the first librarian and the first former staff person at Queens Public Library to serve on the Board of Trustees. So that I hope that is an opening door for future generations of boards of trustees to also include the voice, the experience, and the persona of what librarians are, have that voice on the boards of trustees as well. So it's been an honor to be in this profession. I've had nothing but joy in this profession. I've been asked quite often, have you had a bad day in this profession? Not one day has been a bad day. Every day has been a great day. And serving, it's about service. Serving my community, I continue to do that as a member of the Board of Trustees.
And it has been an honor to interview you.